This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Boz Digital Labs, and JZ Microphones. So get ready to rock.
Every day that Matt and I wake up and we start designing studios, we really look at it from the standpoint, this one's nothing like any other one. So right now we're doing a room for Kid Rock. It's so cool, it's insane. I mean, it's just completely unique, completely different. He's an unusual guy and knows exactly what he wants. I'm very proud of it. I'm telling you this because all the studios we're doing are completely different and unique.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Now find out how awesome your studio can be at OWC. This episode is sponsored by Boz Digital Labs, offering you the coolest plugins for your mixes like the Hoser XT and Plus 10 dB Signature Series. You can transform your drums with Sasquatch Kick Machine or Transgressor, get massive bass with Big Clipper, or add width and depth using Mongoose and Imperial Delay. All Boz Digital Labs plugins are available as fully functioning, no time limit free trials, so you can check them out on your mixes right now. Just go to bozdigitallabs.com or click the link in the show notes of this episode. This episode is sponsored by JZ Microphones with the unique Golden Drop capsule design. The Black Hole Series BH1S and BH2 microphones with the hole in the middle for a one-of-a-kind shock mount combine innovative industrial design with careful craftsmanship to bring a world-class sound to your studio, resulting in a level of quality and detail in your recordings that you won't find in other mics. Go to jzmic.com or click the link in the show notes below and use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR right now to get an incredible 50% off. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Steven Durr, a studio designer and acoustical architect with an amazing list of over 2,000 clients, including Garth Brooks, Neil Young, Dan Auerbach, Mark Ronson, Arcade Fire, Fame Studios, RCA Studio B, Zac Brown, Eno of Spoon, and Eric Johnson, just to name a few. He's also designed music venues, film studios, healthcare facilities, and sports venues for clients like Disney, Willie Nelson, NASCAR Motor Speedways, Library of Congress, Hilton Hotels, DreamWorks Studios, Nissan Manufacturing, Vanderbilt University, Austin City Limits, and the Cleveland Browns. Originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Steve moved to Nashville in 1977 to design the sound reinforcement systems for Opryland Theme Park, and then to redesign the monitoring for the legendary Woodland Studios in East Nashville, where I actually started out as an intern 25 years ago. I'm super psyched to be hanging with Steve today in my studio to talk about what it means to design the perfect recording studio or any kind of, situation for capturing the very best sound that you can, and how you can improve your own studio space and monitoring, whether you're in a home studio or a pro studio. So please welcome Steven Durr to Recording Studio Rockstars. Steve, are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready.
Dude, such a pleasure to have you here in the studio.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here. It's actually a very cool studio.
Thanks very much,
really
man.
Wonderful vibe.
We were talking about it beforehand, but this is really a very, very much of a full circle, because when I interned at Woodland Studios in, I guess it was 1994,
Really?
That's when I met you, and you were in there with Steve Hennig, and you guys were building Studio C, which I actually got to help do some of the wiring in there with you.
That's true. It's funny. Woodland was the first studio I ever worked in. When I started working in studios, in Nashville. It's kind of a crazy story. All the studios were run by engineers that were union. And so they'd have 3 engineers in the studio, and one of them would actually make the records, and the other 2 would either smoke cigarettes or read the newspaper or just sit in the back of the room. But the record companies had to pay them to be there. And so what happened was the record companies got tired of paying these guys, 3 of them, to sit there, and they wanted to hire independent engineers. But unfortunately, all the monitoring systems were completely unique to each individual person, such as at RCA Studios. The monitors were so out of kilter with reality. But if you had a year's learning curve as an engineer, you could figure out how to make a great record on them because you knew that add this much bass or take that much bass away.
Right.
But they literally had Altec 604s on the wall at RCA with a piece of pink telephone wire, 3-conductor telephone wire that was solid. It was the red, green, and yellow wires, and it was stapled around the door and down the frame and up on the other side and all the way back around to the closet and hooked into a 50-watt Macintosh amp that'd probably been there since dirt. And that's what they made all the records on. So when they hired an independent engineer and they stuck them in that studio, there was absolutely no way for them to have any idea what their sounds were like, what the kick drum really came out like, what the vocals sounded like, because this thing was completely wacko, and it was job security. I mean, they did that on purpose. And so I was very fortunate. I grew up in a group of people that taught me a very strong lesson that stuck with me all my life, is that if it sounds like loudspeakers, it's wrong. Nobody goes to a concert to hear loudspeakers. They go to a concert to have an emotional experience with whoever that person is on stage, whether it's in a church or wherever it is. And the same thing in a studio. If you sit in the studios that we designed, you'll find that if you close your eyes, you'll literally be able to feel that artist in the room with you. And that's because the speakers disappear out of what we do. And so that was that. I literally worked in probably 95% of the studios in Nashville, which was one of those deals, just being at the right place at the right time, because I took what I knew, which is if it sounds like loudspeakers, it's wrong, and adapted that to monitoring. And so you can mix something in our studio, take it out, it sounds exactly the same from day one. You don't have a learning curve at all. And so that was the part of the studio transition for me, because I'd been doing a lot of live sound, I'd made a lot of records, but I'd never really been a studio designer. I was all just sort of forced into it, which I was very grateful for.
What was, at that time, what was the real world? I mean, it's the real world, and what you listen to today is very different probably from what it was back then. It might have been in bookshelf speakers or, an old muscle car or what? No,
not really. I mean, as an example, Owen Bradley, who did all the Patsy Cline records and was just an unbelievably wonderful human being. I could tell you a lot of stories about Owen. He was just a real gentleman. He had a pair of 6x9 car speakers in cigar boxes, and that was the first pair of near fields I ever saw. And he had these huge, big Altec speakers that were ugly, but they sounded wonderful. But he would mix everything and then put it into a 6x9 car speaker in a cigar box that was sitting on the console,
Wow.
And that was his final, mix of what it sounded like. Well, if you go back and listen to those Patsy Cline records today, they still sound quite unbelievable. So, yeah, it was an API machine and all that API console and that sort of thing, but still the balance and the feel of that was where that came from. So that was really the issue, was how do you know when something sounds and feels right? If you listen to all the Al Green records, I worked a lot with Willie Mitchell in Memphis, and with his monitors, the same thing. What we try to do with where we are with this is to take that out of the equation. So if you're an engineer and you're sitting in a control room and you don't have to think about, well, I wonder if I got enough kick drum. Well, I wonder if the cymbals are too bright. I wonder where the vocals land in that mix. Then you take that out of somebody's brain. All of a sudden, they become an incredible engineer because they no longer eat up half of their brain. Now, today, people are looking at a screen, so there goes the other half. And so that explains a lot of why records sound like they sound like, because you don't hear what you're listening to, and you're looking at a screen the whole time. So for me, it's very frustrating. But I want to say one thing. I'm not some old coot that hates digital. I actually really am a big fan of it. I think I think Pro Tools is great. I have Pro Tools HD in my own studio. I cut everything 16 track, 2-inch, and then dump it down to Pro Tools and do editing and that sort of thing. It's just that we've had 100 years to work out the sound of analog. We've had about 10 really good years to work out the sound of digital stuff. So it's not that oh gosh, everything's got to be analog. It doesn't. I love analog. Don't get me wrong. The beauty of it's amazing. But at the same time, I really appreciate the beauty of digital because it's a completely different recording medium and a completely different listening medium. So to answer your question, I don't think there's any difference. I think the records that I'm listening to today still translate very well. As an example, I was watching the Grammys and I never heard of Daft Punk, had no idea who they were. And they had the helmets on and they had all this crap going on. And I'm thinking, man, what in the world must that record sound like? I went and bought it. It brought me to tears. It was astounding what it sounded like. So it's not something. If I look at everything I do as an emotional experience, everything that happens in audio is an emotional experience. The goal is to move you emotionally. Everything that I do, I don't get to the point where it makes me cry before I'm through with it. I understand all the technical aspect. I understand eigen modes and all that sort of thing. But until I can sit in that control room and lose myself emotionally in what I'm doing, we're not there yet. It's not about technology for me. I understand the technology, but if somebody comes up behind you and says they love you and it's a beautiful woman, there's one emotional experience. But if I cock a shotgun behind you, that's a whole nother emotional experience, but it still triggers that uncontrollable urge. And so when I listen to music, that's really what I'm listening for, whether it's live or whether it's recorded.
That's pretty wild. Talk a little bit about the beginning of this journey for you. I mean, how did you get so brilliant to understand things like, what were the terms you use, eigen charts or whatever they are? Where and when did you learn this ability to, really understand how to set up speaker systems and acoustical environments and all that? Was it something that you needed to go to school for? Was it something that you just sort of started doing and then you learn on the journey along the way?
That's how I did it. I was very fortunate. My mentors as a child being 18, were people who were at that time considered the godfathers of acoustics, Don and Carolyn Davis, Dr. C.P. Boner, John White, Larry Howard. These people were people who were very generous with me. And I think the reason they are, and I think this is why it's easier to be successful now than it's ever been in this business, is because I showed up every day with a smile on my face, an incredible amount of enthusiasm. And of course, I drove them crazy. I'm sure I did. Ask them, why this and why that and why this? But they realized that I really had a yearning for this. And I really was a sponge for whatever they had to say or whatever they wanted to translate to me. And developing a reference point for what you're listening to was the greatest gift of all, because I would build something. They were all nerds and hush puppies and pocket protectors, and I was building PAs for rock and roll bands, and I'd drag them out there, at 2 a.m. Gotta listen to this, and they would listen to it and go, "That's awful." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's awful? It sounds unbelievable." "No, that's awful." "Why?" "Because I don't hear the band. I just hear those stupid speakers." And so they just pounded that into me to a point. I go, "Well, then show me if you think that's where we need to be." And they did. They were very kind. They were like, "Okay, this is what it's supposed to sound like." Wow, okay, I got it. And then it just started snowballing into that reference point. How do I get there? What do I need to do to get there? And so when I walk into a space, whether it's a recording studio or concert hall or church or whatever, I know what it's going to sound like before I ever put a pencil to a piece of paper. And the reason is because that reference point sticks in my mind. So if you walk outside and you talk, your voice sounds one way. When you walk into a room, like this room sounds great. When you walk in this room and you talk, your voice sounds very natural. So I want to look for a speaker system that marries to and contributes to that naturalness of this room. I wouldn't particularly pick a line array as an example for a room like this. When you go into like a cathedral with a church, and it's all marble and all steel. I did the Library of Congress buildings in Washington.
Wow.
And they had never had any person ever be able to get anything out of there with articulation of speech. Well, if you don't put sound on the walls, the floor, and the ceiling, it doesn't matter whether you're in a reverberant room. Sound travels in the voice range just like a flashlight. So you aim it where you want to go, and that's thing. It's not that simple, but it is if you understand what you're trying to accomplish from the beginning. And what I was trying to accomplish from the beginning was clear, articulate speech in a room that was very difficult. Yeah. So that knowledge came from these people just keep saying to me over and over again, nope, that's not it. It still sounds like a set of loudspeakers. And you're going to lose your audience immediately if dialogue and articulation of voice goes. So everything that we design is based on beautiful, clear speech, beautiful, clear vocals and instruments, and then in a PA system as an example. And then you can add the rest of it. Nobody really knows what the drums sound like. They don't really understand what the piano sounds like, but they know immediately, I can understand a word they're saying in the middle of it. So
yeah, that's a good
we're
point.
Very careful about dialogue. So
we've had millions of years to train. Well, I don't know actually now. How long has the human species been around?
A while.
Yeah, millions, right? So we've had that long to learn what the human voice sounds like and learn when it's right or wrong.
Sure. And that's the hardest thing to reproduce, believe it or not. But amazingly so, the telephone, which had a frequency response from 300 to 3K, the old ones, you could tell the tonality and who it was and recognize someone's voice. So it's just a matter of understanding that. The books that I read were Don and Carolyn Davis and Dr. Gene Petronas and Alton Everest. Alton Everest's books were just common sense, brilliant about how to build an acoustical environment.
Somewhere around here, I still have I think it's the Engineer's Handbook or something like that. That might have been Alton.
Yeah, he was brilliant.
It's a pretty monstrous book. It's so heavy, you put it down, then you forget where you put it.
Yeah. Well, that's how I learned to design for studios was from Altons Books. I wasn't, all the studios that we design are 100% about the vibe, what it feels like to be there. We don't have, all of them are very unique. Everything that we do is based on conversations with the client, finding out what their expectations are, finding out what their work habits are, and then designing something that they feel comfortable in. And as crazy as it sounds, I designed a studio for a guy that owned a bunch of funeral homes. When we got through, they looked just like a darn funeral home. It had glitter popcorn ceiling and big, heavy purple drapes around. Like, damn, I feel like I'm dying in here. And there was a lot of projects that we did. I designed a studio for a guy that owned a bunch of Holiday Inns. Well, that's exactly what we looked. But that's where his feelings, that's what he felt comfortable in,
Interesting. Something that I've noticed along the way is that my understanding of the vibe of making music and making records comes from the experience in the studio. And then when I go pick up a book and I learn some technical aspect of it, I find it more fascinating and I really embrace it. And I find that's kind of a good way to learn, is like learn through the experience and then pick up the technical that you need. And then you really know what it means to you at that point.
Yeah. Why does it happen that way? And that was a Don and Carolyn Davis thing. Okay, it's great, but you got to know, I feel like that you have to have almost an encyclopedic knowledge of the history of how we got here in order to keep it up current. Because there's not a day that goes by that I don't learn something about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally every day I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. I'm 71. How the hell can that be? I've been doing this since I was 16.
Wow. That's a great story, too. Was it Owen Bradley who had the first pair of near-field monitors?
Ever saw in my life.
And I love that story because when I hear it, it reminds me that there were big speakers in the walls. It didn't, maybe, like you said, they didn't sound great or they sounded pretty kooky.
Yeah.
And then you invent something that's totally thinking outside of the box, put it up on the console so that you can make your mixes sound good. Now, 40 years later or whatever it is it 50 years later almost now?
Frightening.
The near field monitors like my NS10s, they are the ones that are up all the time.
Right.
And we're trying to invent something kooky like, how do I stream this over to my iPhone and listen on a pair of earbuds to make sure it's going to sound right later?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating world. It really comes down to what you feel comfortable with and how long do you want to spend on a learning curve.
Yeah.
Because I love NS10s. I use them all the time. Well, not all the time, but I use them a lot. I walked in the AES show in L.A. right after they quit making them, and in the Yamaha booth, and I said, which one of you Einsteins decided it wasn't a good idea to make NS10s anymore? Well, they weren't very happy with the conversation, but I'm like, you idiots, these things work great. And when I brought them to SonadCon, of course, those guys are very technical. Every little thing is that and we literally ran every test we could run them. They are literally flat from 80 to about 16K, both frequency response and phase response, which is really remarkable. There's no way that that's not an accident. It didn't happen in a design phase because everything in a Japanese language is based on vowels, and ours is all based on consonants. Ours is all based on vowels. So there's that tonality, and the tonality of the way they speak is not going to be something that would be in a set of loudspeakers. Only pair of Japanese loudspeakers I ever heard that I thought really sounded good. They weren't invented here and built in Japan, but those are true Japanese speakers.
So you're saying that the design of the NS10, they may have been conscious of the importance of being able to hear all the vowels in human speech?
It's a total accident. It can't be. You can't do something. Unfortunately, acoustics is not an exact science.
Yeah.
And so I guarantee you, one of my friends owns a really big speaker company. I'll leave him out of the name because he's very famous. And we were hanging out one afternoon, and I walked down to his shop, and he had this table set up with all these speakers on it, and it had alligator clips on all these capacitors and all this stuff. And they had like a little $9, CD player playing in it, and they were playing, I don't know what they were playing. And he listened to it, and he goes, "Yeah, that's great. Make 3,000 of them." And I thought, really? That's how they make speakers nowadays? That's a true story. I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Make 10,000. I was just sitting on the bench with the alligator clips everywhere. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I love hearing stories of design in the studio. I mean, I think so often we look at the stuff we use and it's just a mystery inside a box. And it's really cool to meet somebody who's actually building it. So I appreciate your kind words about my control room here.
I love it.
If you were to describe it, or you were to walk into a space like this and start thinking about what might be good to do with it as far as improving the design or anything like that, or what makes it sound good to you now, is there anything you can share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, really and truly, anything you design in acoustics, the men get separated from the boys 400 and below. So I'm sitting in here. I don't feel intimidated. I don't feel the air conditioning. Musicians hate to be cold, and I don't feel any uncomfortableness. And for me, that's all I need. I don't need any more. I don't know what the low end sounds like from the monitors. I haven't listened to them. I'll give you some suggestions off the bat right now. If you're on a set of speaker stands like you have, and you can move those speaker stands at all, then what happens is that a woofer at those frequencies is just basically piston physics. So if it can move the speaker stand easier than it can compress the air molecules in this room, then it's going to move that stand. And so the bass gets real muddy and distant and very difficult to tell where you are.
Yeah, so you want a very solid
You want
bass.
something to sit on. Yeah, I mean, traditionally we set them on concrete blocks. I don't know who makes those little foam pads. I won't use any names.
I don't remember.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. The little foam pads are very dishonest in the low frequencies. We use some very elaborate, very expensive little plug-in feet. They're like $1.99 at Home Depot, and you just stick them on the bottom. And because what happens with that is that because the whole surface is being covered, the low frequency energy at some frequencies is going to go right through there, and it's literally coupled to that thing. So in near fields, there's a multitude of things that done in near fields. But number one is you want to set them on those little rubber feet for $1.99 at Home Depot. They're about an inch square, and they're about maybe a half an inch tall.
Right, and they're just a thick hard rubber.
That's all you need. Don't need any more. The stands need to be solid, because if the stands are moving, then that low end gets doom, doom, doom. And then the other thing that happens is in any loudspeaker, and you can look at all the spec sheets you want, they don't really mean anything at all. I'll tell you a story about Dick Heiser and technology and specs if you want. But as you go up in frequency, every loudspeaker becomes narrower and narrower in pattern. And so you need to aim those things where you want the higher frequencies to go. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, we use an equilateral triangle, but it's actually about 2 feet behind your head rather than straight on the point. Because if you do them where the focal point's right where you sit, then what happens is you get a bump in the middle and they sound weird on either side. You can sit anywhere in our control room, sounds exactly the same. You can hear the left speaker all the way to the right speaker all the way left. And people that have not experienced that think, well, this guy's crazy. There's no way. But It's the same way with our sound systems. We just finished Ray Stevens Theater, and it's I guess 700 seats or 800 seats at a dinner theater. And you can see we're in that room, and you hear everything left, right, whatever it is. And the secret there is to make both speakers sound exactly the same. And that was something I learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see anywhere in a control room sounds the same. So back to your room, I'm not intimidated by it. And most musicians, most of us that are artists, and I consider myself an artist, not a technician, are somewhat insecure. And so if you walk into a space and it looks like a dentist office, Chris Rock uses a great thing about the living room that his mother had that nobody could go into.
We had one of those too.
Can't sit on the couch, can't sit on I went to a studio, I won't say where it is, but I went to a studio to work on it. They made me take my shoes off, and I thought, well, we're off to a bad start right here, and only because that's intimidating,
Now, for me, it would be if they made me put my shoes on.
Put your damn
right?
shoes on, But it's just, I built a studio for a guy named Steve Nails in Wishy, and they're in Maurice, Louisiana, which is in the middle of nowhere. And he's a very unusual human being. He's one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. The studio is absolutely incredible. It's in an old barn on the river. And the vibe is just unbelievable there. And people flock to that studio. I mean, they have like 9 or maybe 14 Grammys of things that have been recorded in that studio. And there's nothing to it. If you ever went to, nothing to it in the sense of technology or acoustics, If you've ever been to Fame in Muscle Shoals, there's no technology there. You walk in the room and you feel like you ought to be there. Mm-hmm. When we design recording studios, and I'm trying this as an advertisement. This is really how I feel about stuff. This is not a sales pitch at all. You come to our studios and you don't want to leave. And that's really what you're trying to get, is a space that people feel so comfortable. It's kind of frustrating at my house because I have a studio in my backyard, and people come and they won't leave. And we sit there and listen to music all night, and then they postman down the alleyway to go home, And I had some people come from SSL and several years ago, and they're obviously close to the London, and they've heard all the Beatles records, and so I put on a couple of Beatles records, and they literally didn't leave till like 3:30 in the morning, and they said to me, "I've never heard these records before." I'm like, "How could you've never heard these records before? They're right next to your home house there. No, we've never heard them before." Yeah. So it's just a place where you want to hang.
Well, it's pretty interesting because what I've experienced, even listening to the music that I've made in a great studio environment, a great pair of monitors, is you discover that I've never heard my own music before, which is remarkable.
That's true too.
And it's pretty amazing to be able to work in a studio space where everything is dialed in and it really does sound wonderful. Now, I probably like a lot of people listening to this are struggling with something that's not even close, but it's somewhere in the middle. And I did do things like pour sand in those stands, and they're sitting on concrete planter things. Although now I'm thinking I should have just stacked up a whole bunch of those concrete planters and put them right on there.
Paint them black and move on.
Yeah. And all that stuff helped. And then I ended up putting in this software called SonarWorks Reference 4. Yeah. And it's and it really helped out tremendously with my low end because it's helping to compensate for some of what's really screwed up in here. I know when I talked with Joe Pisapi, a friend of mine here in Nashville, and you had come in and worked with him in his room, he pointed out that you had done a little bit of EQing and stuff to help out with the speakers. Do you want to make any comments about whether EQ can help out in a studio monitoring situation, whether it's something to be avoided, any of that stuff?
Oh, I could talk about that for a couple of days. The truth of it is that I've never been into a room that couldn't sound better with the right equalization, but the magic word there is right. There's a couple of really things that really destroy equalization for most people. Number one is there are no equalizers that really sound good in room equalization. Certainly no narrow band equalizers that have very narrow filters. Every time you use a filter that the slopes of the filter and how narrow it is, the more phase shift it has. There's no such thing as there are filters now that have no phase shift in them. Unfortunately, they don't sound good. And if you're trying to get to the emotional part of it, then that's another thing that kills the reference point. So yes, the only equalizers that are ever made that are musical, and this is everything in art is an opinion. This is just mine. I just happen to be right. Are made by White Instruments in Austin, Texas. This story is a wonderful story. Tom White had a company that built filters for the military, for radar. As you sent, in the old days when you sent a radar signal out, it bounced off something and come back. Well, they had to be a very well-tuned filter in order to be able to capture that return and not all the other garbage that's going on around it. And Dr. Boner, C.P. Boner, was the godfather of room equalization along with Don Davis. And he was in Austin, Texas as well. And so he went over and said, can you build me a set of filters and for room equalization? And so that's where I learned, was in that school of thought. And so there's just a multitude of reasons that works. There's a couple of things about equalization. There's a million things, but I'll try to think of them as I can.
Yeah, just introductory stuff is great for us anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. The third octave equalization was developed, is called Renard numbers, and I think that's the pronunciation after some guy. But those numbers were established in the frequency bands that are the most ideal for determining human listening. I'm doing a lot of research now, and Matt and I are doing a lot of research now on hearing aids, and we're taking that technology and move that into hearing aids. But so for room equalization, there's a couple of things that happen. Is we can do all these drawings and all these documentation, and boy, everything's got to go here, and we've got traps here, and we've got all this crazy crap. And then somebody comes over and sets that big rack on the side of it, and now the environment that this speaker is working in is completely different than the environment on the other side of the room. So the beauty of equalization is you can literally make those two speakers sound the same. So we'll put the EQ in there. If you're using more than 2 or 3 dB of 3 or 4 filters, you're beating yourself against the wall.
Right.
It's got to sound good to start with, or equalization is not going to do you any good. Yeah. I get so frustrated with watching people hook up like a smart system or some analyzer system, and then they sit there and pick through every little part of it. One of the reasons that I got all the jobs in Nashville was because White Instruments equalizers were everywhere, except the person that was using them, who were named anonymous, was turning every one of the 31 filters on both of them. And so I'm looking at it going, well, wait a minute now. There can't be 62 reasons that you have a problem here. So we don't use a microphone in the room. We don't use a series of microphones in the room. We use a microphone that's on a meter, a really precision B&K meter, and we move it around the room. So because if you set a microphone in one position, like the system you were talking about, what happens is it does that analysis, and it tunes the room for that one particular spot. If you move the microphone left or right a foot, 6 inches, you get a completely different picture. Mm-hmm. So I understand the concept. Dick Kaiser said one time, you can't fix something before it happens. So the only thing you can possibly do is change the direct sound from the loudspeaker. You may compensate for the speaker's response in the room, but you're not really changing anything at all in the room. So people get this, I'm tuning my room. Well, no, you can't tune your room. You can only tune your loudspeakers because that's the only thing you can change. So what we do is we move that microphone around. We write on a chart with a pencil exactly where those frequencies are. And we'll get a bump in the response, and we'll go to that White Instrument equalizer and take just a teeny bit of that bump off. Because if you take it down to where it's flat all the way across, you usually end up putting some of it back. So I'll make half a dB changes, quarter dB changes. I went to a Sonodcom class one time, and they said, well, you can't hear a 1 dB change. I said, well, excuse me, I can't. Oh, nobody can hear that. I said, well, blindfold me, And they would put pink noise on, they'd make a half a dB change. Yeah, I hear that's like at 400. It was like weird, But that's just how my mind, it's an acuity. It's not, God, I'm sure God gave me something there, but it's still an acuity. You can learn how to do it. So the equalization we use is band-limited pink noise. We use a microphone that we move around the room, and we use very small amounts of equalization to make the two speakers sound the same. The next trick we do is listen to that noise, pan left and right. And then we make small changes in equalization till the two speakers sound the same. I don't care what they measure like. They sound the same. That's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And so once that's working in the way it wants to go, then you can literally put something on and be very close. I would love to do, if you want to do a video thing one time, and tune your near fields for you. So you can,
Sure. Yeah, that sounds super cool.
Yeah, and that way you can see exactly what we do with near fields.
You know, one thing I can say about trying to treat my control room and the speakers in here is even when I don't know what I'm doing, the act of trying to do something and make it sound better has been successful every time for me, you know.
That's because you're smart.
Well, you know, like getting the stands sorted out, spacing them, aiming them properly,
Sure.
or at least getting close, putting in the software, the SonarWorks software.
Yeah, it does.
It helped a lot with the low end because things were so screwy. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free introduction to mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you are in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. I wondered if you would tell us some stories about some of these awesome studios that you have had a chance to work in too. I know you worked with Mark Ronson.
I did.
And I believe his studio's in Memphis, is that right?
No, it's in London.
Oh, it's in London, excuse me. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the story about doing that?
Yeah, he is, I don't work with assholes, okay? I won't tell you who the artists are that I don't work with, but I don't work with assholes. There's a couple of them I went and met, and, well, it's not really that, it shouldn't be that blunt. It's just that we don't communicate. And so if I can't understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, I certainly can't design you a recording studio.
Right.
You know? So it's about me understanding what your feelings are and what you're trying to accomplish. I'm very leery about doing vanity studios. I had a friend who called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to Mark Ronson in a minute." Squirrel. And so and he said, "I've got this project I want you to work on, and it's this lady that's got money, and she wants to redo this studio." And I'm like, you know, what's it really comes down to? Well, it turns out it's Leon Russell's studio, The Church, in Tulsa, which is one of the coolest jobs I've ever done. And the woman is the sweetest person you've ever met, her and her husband both, and they're dedicated to Leon. They're dedicated to make it something that's real. And it's just a gift to be around. Mark Ronson, we had kind of a weird start, but he called me and he said, "My name is Mark, and I'm in New York, and I'm moving my studio to London. Would you mind?" And I've got artist renditions of it, and it looks like a diner, and I just really don't think that's where I want to work. So he said, "Would you come to London and look at it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, great." I didn't know who he was. And so I thought, yeah, sure. Somebody named Mark wants to get along. I'll send you a ticket. Okay, well, that's a good start, you know? So I go there, and it's in this place called Tile Yards, which is this complex of hundreds of artists kind of things, and mastering rooms and studios and stuff. And in there's a little coffee shop. And so I was going to meet with him, I don't know, 11 or something, you know? And so there's a lot of people sitting at a table, and I'm not very shy. And so I get croissants and stuff and sit down at the table, and all these people are talking, and everybody's kind of communicating back and forth. And somebody said, "Well, obviously you got a weird accent. Where are you from?" And I said, "From Nashville." "Oh, that's cool. What are you doing here?" So I'm meeting Mark Ronson to look at his studio building. He's got a studio going up here. And so we talked for a little bit longer, and I said, "Well, I guess it's got to go." He said, "No, I'm here." He was sitting at the end of the table. I had no idea who it was. He just was totally in the middle of the group and was not, "Yeah, I'm Mark Ronson." Yeah. He's a sweetheart of a guy. So he already had a young guy that was designing the studio for him. And his name was Chris, and he's got a great company now. He's very successful in London. I'll take full responsibility for him being successful because it's a good joke because we had a lot of conversations about it. He goes, "Well, this and this," and I said, "No, that stuff doesn't matter." He said, "What do you mean it doesn't matter?" "No, we don't care about that." He said, "What are you talking about?" No, it's only important that it feels right, that it's got a great vibe. Well, what does that mean? I said, well, colored lights and colors that are fun and interesting. And you walk in there and you want to stay there. It's not a lot of bright lights. It's, the air conditioning is too big and all these sort of things. And so about a year, we became great friends. And because you would go there, you would think, well, this guy's going to be really offended that some jerk from Nashville showing up, going to, well, I'm going to do this. And so we've become great friends. And so I talk to him all the time, used to a lot more than I do now. And he said, man, every time I walk into a room now, I look around, I go, there's a little man standing on my shoulder going, hey, motherfucker, it's the vibe. Can I say that?
Yeah,
Probably
you totally
not,
can. No, you can, definitely.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have the worst language. When we did the lectures for the church, church people, it's called World Technical something, church thing. That everybody in my office is sitting in the back of the room chewing their nails going, oh, God, he's going to say something. What's he going to say next? Right? He's going to drop the F-bomb in the middle of the church thing. But I did pretty good with it.
No, hey, man, this is a rock and roll podcast.
Okay.
I make sure it's got the little E for explicit on iTunes.
Well, it was really funny, though, because he's just a great guy. He's like, man, every time it's like the little guy's going, fucking vibe, man. Don't worry about that. And that's really what I grew up in. Nobody made records in real studios. The first real studio I ever saw was Tom Headley Room. It was designed for a guy named Bill Evans, who's turned out to be a great friend, a wonderful human being. We worked on the Kansas records there, and I got to work with Stevie Wonder's band there right after Songs in the Key of Life, and I'd done the audio for the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival the first 7 years that it was open. That's a whole story in itself. New Orleans was the most wonderful place in the whole world, except for the drugs and too much fun. Yeah. But that was the first real studio I ever saw, was Tom Headley's studio in the country in Bogalusa, which is still there. And Bill Evans was one of these guys that came around our studio, which was just a hole in the wall, designed by a guy named Welton Chaton. And we had a 12-input Audiotronics console and an 8-track Scully. And we'd made a lot of great records on it. And I engineered a million-seller record, and I got a gold watch. And the guy that was on the record, it was on Ronco Records, the guy that did the record got new furniture for Section 8 housing. It was just...
Wait, Ronco is in Ronco Deluxe?
Yeah, Ronco,
really?
Yeah. Ronco record. We did sound-alikes and stuff like that. But anyway, it was a really interesting life in Louisiana. That's a whole nother episode. So I know Studio C, where we first met over at Woodland, was also a Tom Headley room, and that's where I learned his name, because you guys said, yeah, this is a Tom Headley room, young intern, and it's got a compression ceiling. Yeah.
And I didn't know what the hell that meant, but it stuck with me forever.
Yeah, Tom was I guess I don't know. He had a really the only person that ever really said, okay, this is a real studio, and he charged a lot of money for it, and they were beautiful. And I really, at this point, look back on him and thank him very much, because the reality of it was, it taught me, it was sort of like going places. I tell people all the time, if your reference point for seafood is Captain D's, you got a problem, If you haven't been down to Louisiana and eaten, crawfish out of the ditch or really fresh fish from the ocean, that reference point will stick with you. And what I learned from Bill Evans and Tom Headley's studio was that there's a lot more to this available, because our studio was fine. We had a great time with it. We had a lot of fun, and we made fun records. But moving into that was like, okay. And it really helped boot me out of Louisiana. It's like, oh, man, if this is what's going on, I need to be a part of this, And so learning to change your reference point, it was a really important part of my life.
Well, I thought we'd also give another shout out to a mutual friend, Steve Hennig, who I met at the same time as you, and you guys were partners in the Studio C.
Yeah.
And he, so things I learned about Steve, he had, I think it was Heart of Texas Music out of Texas.
Yes.
And
Austin.
then years later, I was up at Electrical Audio working with Steve Albini. Yeah. And he had this fantastic sounding bass cabinet, 15-inch speaker. He says like, this is the Dietz cabinet. It's, they dip it in plastic or something like that. Yeah. So sure enough, I got one, and it turned out it was from Steve, and
he designed
Small World.
He did crossovers, equalization. He designed all of those with, what's that sound like? And that's how we became great friends. Same with Walter Sear. Walter Sear was like, I don't care. What's it sound like?
Yeah.
You know? And Henning and I, sadly, Walter and Henning were the only two people that ever called me on the phone and go, you got to listen to this. It sounds really good. And I'm like, I would, because they knew, Henning knows exactly what things sound like.
Yeah.
And Walter knew what things sound like. And there wasn't a whole lot of other people that I could say, they would call me and say, hey, man, this piece of gear sounds great. Oh, okay, that's wonderful. And it didn't. It was like, ugh.
Well, it's funny. So there I was doing my internship, and I was doing all the wiring and the cabling. And so I'm wiring away patch-based stuff or something like that, or probably like a mic panel in the room. And you guys were shooting out the room. And, at one point you're like, hey, cover your ears. We're going to play some white noise through the speakers. And first time I ever saw that. And then another thing he said, I was playing music through the API console while I was wiring. I was listening to some jazz album or something like that. And along come the toms, and you guys kind of poked fun at these super high tuned toms. And you were like, this is the sound of, a great drum sound and a record. And then you said, you're talking about the top head being tuned one way and the bottom head being tuned a little different. And then you said, the perfect snare sound, or what the snare sound you need to know about is an ambassador on the top and a diplomat on the bottom. And for the life of me, I thought you guys were dropping a sexual humor joke, and I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Well, not Henning, but it could have been for me. Henning is, every time I say it's a cuss word around his kids, he gets really nervous, and they're fully grown.
That's funny, man. Yeah. That's funny. And I think I pronounced his name wrong. I said Hennig. It's Henning.
Yeah,
right,
he's the greatest human. I mean, I've never, ever met anybody in my life that said a discouraging word about him.
Yeah.
He was just he still is. I saw him last Wednesday in Austin. He's working in a spectacular studio that's just one of the most beautiful sounding places I've ever built, and he's doing great. We bought Elvis's Neve desk that Rupert built custom for Elvis to take on the road, and the patch feels in a mahogany case. So you can imagine how much the damn thing weighs. The patch feels on umbilical cords in a mahogany case. And all the Elvis live records were cut. Elvis took this console in this mahogany cases wherever we went, and we bought it from a guy out of his basement. I mean,
that's the one that went into Steve's studio in Texas now, or?
Yes, that's the one. It's actually not Steve's studio. It's one he works at. Belongs to a really wonderful family, the Drennans, and they have that desk in that studio. It sounds so good.
Didn't you have the Elvis's API board in the studio?
No, we had the RCA.
RCA
it came out of RCA New York, the original API board. Henning found it in some lady's garage in Ohio, and we bought it for $8,000.
Wow.
And it still had the RCA logos on it and everything.
That's wild. That's wild. Well, it was definitely eye-opening for me to be in that studio environment with you guys and see, the level of attention towards the importance of sound and design and putting everything in and having a great console and all that. Some fun facts I learned about Steve Henning at the time was that he had played all the banjo parts on the Dukes of Hazzard soundtrack.
Oh, that guy's an unbelievable musician. He'd never tell you in a million years. He'd never tell you. He played on Eric Johnson's records.
I grew up listening to that.
Yeah, he's played on Eric Johnson's records. I mean, the guy's a friggin' musician genius. I mean, he really is. His kids now, Zac Attack, is out on the road with, what's the name of that? Rock of Ages.
Rock of Ages,
he's a lead guitar player. The kid's a monster guitar player. Well, hello. He grew up with Stevie Ray Vaughan and his old man in the house. And Ray Henning was a great guitar player too. Right.
I forgot about that. So you guys had recorded some of Stevie Ray Vaughan's records, I believe, or Steve had maybe or something.
He did.
But and he told me stories about getting the guitar sound, and he talked about, gosh, what did he say? He said he put the amp up on a chair or something and leaned it back just so, and it was all about getting it up off the ground.
Yeah. And I love Eric Johnson. He's one of the sweetest people in the world. But he listens to 9-volt batteries. And we were designing his studio. He said, well, all this wire goes in one direction. I'm like, okay. And he said, I'm going to take it home tonight and determine which direction the speaker wire goes. Okay. I quit doing cocaine a long time ago. I don't think he does. He only eats vegetables and stuff like that. But so he took it home, and I thought, this is nuts. And I swear we hooked that stuff up, and it sounded unbelievable. I'm thinking, hell, take this wire home and tell me how it sounds. Which way is it supposed to go to? I was really flabbergasted. And they, him and Henning and Steve and Eric do the same. They still listen to wire going every direction. They're happy to do that. They make guitar cables with arrows on it.
No kidding. That's wild.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of nutty, but if they're happy, that's fine.
Yeah, and I've heard some stuff. I mean, for example, David Sauls with Wire World down in Florida, he's designed some pretty remarkable cables. Yeah. And we're using them right now on our mics, in fact. We're using the Wire World Oasis
testing
cables.
1, 2. Who was it?
They definitely
I know what it
great.
was. Somebody said yesterday, why sound guys can only go testing 1, 2, because 3 you got to lift. Okay. Somebody passed that joke on yesterday. I'm not a cable guy. I don't really think it sounds that much different, but I'll accept other people's opinion. But I never heard it. Never struck me as that was an element to get you a great sounding sound system.
Right.
Know, whatever it is.
Well, I've certainly heard all kinds of a variety of opinions on things. Some people swearing by it. Some people, when I work with Tom Lord Alge was mixing a record for us, and he was just like, I just put up a pair of NS10s and I use zip wire for it. He didn't care, matter. And of course, his mixes were sounding great.
Yeah,
so
that's the biggest point that people need to learn is that sounds come from guitar players. Right. Sounds come from drummers. It doesn't really, you got a mediocre drummer. I don't care what kind of cable you bought, it's just going to be mediocre. I mean, it's just, that was the hardest lesson for me to learn making records. I was working on a record, and a friend of mine's a great guitar player and a great singer, and he'd been on a gig, and he came in, and I looked around and said, Courtney, man, this is the worst. I've lost it, man. I don't understand. I can't make this even sound good. He goes, stereo, that band's terrible. You'll never be able to make them sound good. And it was like, bingo, light bulb went off, It's really true.
So one last thing about Steve Henning is he was also designing a 6-string B-bender guitar that had, I remember you guys said, I don't know what the hell airline cable is, but I remember that you said it used airplane cable.
He just did an album with it. And I don't know. I don't want to say guitar. Guitars to me are like heroin, I mean, I know people like, well, I was going to buy a new house, but damn, I just couldn't pass up this guitar. And I have friends who have staggering amounts of money, and all they buy is guitars. I don't get it. But anyway, that's fine if that's what I want to do. But I don't want to say Guitar Player Magazine or some major guitar company has really endorsed this pedal thing. It's really cool. And he's the only one in the world. And he just finished a record on it. I'll send you one. Wow. It's really, really good.
I remember it being described as sort of like a pedal thing on the ground might have like 6 pedals on it, and each one bends one of the 6 strings on the guitar.
Yeah, like there's a cable that goes from each pedal to each one of the strings. And I don't know.
That's wild. Well, that's cool stuff, man. Well, hey, we'll take a break now for just a second. We'll come back in for the jam session. Rockstars, a reminder that we'll have links to stuff we're talking about in the show notes. So just click through if you're on your mobile device, or go to rsrockstars.com, and we'll see you in just a minute for the jam session. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your existing Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD drive, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio far into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. If you want to design and build a great house, then you're going to need great tools. You could build it with an old hammer and some nails, but it's a whole lot easier to use an air compressor and a nail gun. Well, the same thing goes for mixing. If you really want to create a pro-sounding mix, then it makes a lot of sense to start with a great toolbox of awesome plugins. This is where Boz Digital Labs comes in to help you get killer mixes easily, quickly, and creatively. Provocative will make your vocals sound lush and wide. Transgressor and Manic Compressor can help your drums leap out of the speakers. Gatey Weighty and Big Beautiful Door offer unique new ways to tighten up your tracks, while the Wall will make sure your mixes are in your face and competitive. And my favorite is Sasquatch Kick Machine, which can transform your kick drum from sounding like a home studio cardboard box into the perfect punchy kick without using samples or triggers. To download your unlimited trial of any plugin now or get one of Boz's free plugins, go to bozdigitallabs.com and put the best in your mixing toolbox. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. If you want to capture every nuance of a great performance in your studio, then you need to start with a microphone that is crafted with great care and attention to detail. JZ Mics in Riga, Latvia designs amazing sounding microphones that are handcrafted with jeweler's precision to bring you incredible detail in your recordings. At the heart of JZ microphones is the unique Golden Drop capsule design, which uses a lighter, faster diaphragm that delivers great clarity and fidelity while avoiding distracting colorations and distortions. Make sure to check out the Black Hole series BH1S and BH2 with the awesome looking hole in the middle of the mic, combining innovative industrial design with meticulous electrical engineering to help your studio sound incredibly expensive for an affordable price. JZ offers a 5-year warranty, free shipping to the US, and 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, for a limited time, if you use the coupon ROCKSTAR, you will get an astonishing 50% off. I got one. You're hearing my voice right now on the BH1S. So what are you waiting for, rock stars? Go to jzmic.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey, rock stars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Steve Durr, joining us to talk about designing recording studios and acoustical spaces. And we're excited to jump into some more questions about some of the amazing artists that he's worked with, but also how we can help you figure out how to make your own space better. So, Steve, you ready to jam?
Sure.
Cool, man. Do you mind that I'm calling you Steve, too?
I don't care what you call me.
Sounds good.
My nickname was Stereo.
Stereo?
Yeah, and nobody knew. Like, well, who fixed this? I don't know. Some guy named Stereo. Never knew how to get in touch with me. So
that's good.
I love that.
I like it.
Except but I fucked up. I was mono.
I like to ask guests to share an inspirational quote on the podcast. I wonder if you had anything that you wanted to share that gets us excited about hitting the studio.
A couple of things. One is that my ex-wife divorced me because her therapist told her there was something wrong with somebody's happy all the time. And I think Cowboy Jack sort of summed all that up, Jack Clement, in the fact that, we're in the fun business, and if we're not having fun, then we're not doing our job. And the other one is from a friend of mine who turned me on to, I can't even think of his name. But anyway, he said one time that we live in a society that celebrates mediocrity. And so I wake up every day in fear of not being misunderstood. And I thought, boy, there's a lot of depth there, because a lot of things that I do, as anybody, as I said before, everything in art's an opinion. So the things that I do are just my opinion. There's no facts here. I've just been very fortunate to be able to do that. And most of the things I listen to are just terribly mediocre.
Yeah.
And so Walter Sear used to tell me all the time, Steve, you're not that good. Everybody else is just that bad. And I thought, that's a really great quote, too. I've been very fortunate to be around people who were very witty. And
let me say that one back to you that you just said. So I wake up every morning in fear of not being misunderstood.
That's correct.
All right, good.
That's Oscar Wilde.
That's Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. He was quite my hero of smart-ass remarks. But if you think about it, it's very brilliant. We do live in a society that celebrates mediocrity. When I grew up in New Orleans, if you couldn't play as well as Joe Bonamassa, however you say, and his whole band, then you didn't work in a nightclub. And I thought, interesting enough, living here and listening to the mediocrity of a lot of things that I hear, and not just here, but in the music business in general, I lost some sense of whether that was reality or not. Sort of like, I'm going to try to do this without getting emotional. Did I really hear things that were that good? Did I really understand? Were the players really that good? Because I don't play instruments. I didn't ever had a desire to play an instrument. And so were the players really good? And was the music really that good? And so I was in Las Vegas, and a friend of mine said, have you ever seen Santa Fe and the Fat City Horns? And I'm like, no, I don't know who that is. He said, well, they play every Monday night. Oh, actually, I was in I can't tell you where I was. I was in and I said, no, I've never seen them. And he said, well, you need to go see them because it's a religious experience. And I thought, and I went to see them, and it was a religious experience. If you're in Las Vegas on a Monday night, there's a guy there, in Jerry Lopez, who's the sweetest, most wonderful human being in the world. And his band is called Santa Fe and the Fat City Horns. You can look them up you want something on YouTube, look them up. Don't look me up. And it was such a refreshing experience because there's 15 people on stage. It's a full horn band. I mean, obviously, there may be more than that. And you could drive a truck through the spaces of those players. They're playing all this stuff, but it's just air all the way through. You could see all the way back in there. It's one of the greatest experiences I've been back 3 times just to sit there and stare straight. I went and fixed his monitors in his studio. Listen, man, you're my hero, And he calls it healing in the desert. And what it is all the players, all the shows are dark on Monday night. And so all those players show up and play in this band. And look it up. It's one of the most amazing things you ever see. And that was this only happened last year. That was like, okay, you know what? I really did listen to people that good. And they really did play that good. And it is possible to do that.
And what's the name of that band again?
It's called Santa Fe and the Fat City Horns.
Okay, cool.
And it's truly a religious experience. Every Monday night they play this little club in outside of Las Vegas. It's on Las Vegas Boulevard, but it's out past the airport. And it's called Boondoggles. Boondocks.
We'll check that out. I'll see if I can find a link to that in YouTube and drop that in the show notes. So I know another artist that you worked with here locally is Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys.
Yes.
I wonder if you could tell us a story about working with him and helping him put his studio together.
Another one of those things where the studio looked very nice, but it didn't have a vibe. And so, and he likes to record everything just open, live, and real. All of his equipment is old Spectrasonics desk, a lot of old vintage stuff. And so he likes to work in environments that have bleed and leakage. And so we were fortunate enough to go in that room and modify, if you will, the original design was done by someone else, so that it had this amazing energy. People, well, leakage. Leakage is not bad if it sounds good. Leakage is bad in a warehouse, but leakage is not bad in a room that's that the leakage has some tonality to it and it doesn't sound hollow. So that was the main thing. And then he asked us if we'd design a little room for him at Electric Lady in New York, and we were fortunate enough to do that, and it worked as well.
Very cool. So when you're talking about leakage,
very pleasant guy.
We're talking about Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed. We're talking about the idea of the sound of one instrument bleeding into the mics of another instrument that's nearby, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you listen to Led Zeppelin, all that stuff was cut in a room in Olympic, just in the room, and all at one time. See, that's what really breaks my heart about what I hear now. There's two things. One is that when you put a band in a room, you get the tension of the performance. You get all those people playing off each other, and they actually are moving each other emotionally. That was a great part. I can play one better kind of thing. Now it's like, well, you may be in L.A., maybe over there. Right. The other thing that's really happened for me in making records that's been very disappointing is there used to be a very strict line. I don't want to say strict. There was a very defined line between that side of the glass with the players and this side of the glass are engineers. And now that every player has Pro Tools in his house, they're all of a sudden an engineer too. And so they'll show up at the studio, well, I've got this 87 that, well, just because 87 doesn't mean it sounds good. Some 87s didn't sound good at all. And so they've sort of, the glass, if you will, that wall has sort of disappeared. And now they're wandering in here, making decisions about what things sound like. Now, if it's somebody like James House, who's a friggin' genius, and his stuff sounds unbelievable, got it, But when you get somebody that's the lead drummer and he wants to tell you that, well, you know, I got to, you play drums, I'll run the console, you know, kind of thing. So that's really marred, for me, the quality of recording. Not all of them, but a lot of them have been watered down. You know, really what happened was that the record companies were the filter, and they kind of kept what you wanted to listen to as the motivation. So they would break records and put them on the radio, and there was no, you know, you couldn't get past that point. Some people did, but not very many people got past it at all. And now there's no filter. It's just all over everywhere. Yeah. So people who are extremely mediocre are making records, and then everybody listens to us, well, hell, I can sing that good. I can play that good. And so the market gets flooded with all these people that have little or no talent, you know. And I don't mean that ugly. I really don't. Again, it's opinion. But there's some really ugly-ass stuff out there. Like, good Lord, who told that fool he could sing, you know? Yeah.
But yeah, you must be hearing some stuff, like you mentioned, that is exciting you, and some great work that's happening out there. What are some of the things that you feel like you've seen in artists that you've worked with that have been exceptional? Have you seen certain traits in people that seem to be consistent as far as when somebody is going to, when you think somebody's going to create exceptional work or be successful at what they do?
That's a good question. I don't know. You know, Matt, who's become sort of the person that I listen to a lot about music. He works with me. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's a wonderful human being. He knows all the new fangled stuff. That's like an old guy. He knows all the new shit, you know. And somebody will call about wanting to build a studio, and I'm like, do you know who that is? Oh, yeah, that's so-and-so. Oh, great. I've never heard of that fool, you know? And so I've listened to things that I thought were really good. None of them that really just bowl me over. I mean, you know, if you go back and listen to, last night I was listening to Derek and the Dominoes. Oh, my God, you know? And stuff like that. So there's some great stuff out there. That guy was telling you about that's over here across the street from you. He's really, really talented. Jared, I can't pronounce his last name either. And then, you know, there's a record called The Bossa Nova Just Smells Funky, which is a great album. Everything on there is great. Here Come the Mummies are one of the best bands I've ever listened to in my whole life. It just depends. I mean, I just really, you know, there's not a lot of things that I jump up and down about, but I will when I hear them. I'm very like, oh, yeah, that's great, you know?
So can you describe a little bit more about Dan Auerbach's studio? I mean, what... when you walk in to work on a space and help with the vibe and help with the sound and stuff, I mean, is it like, do you walk and you're like, we got to get rid of these speakers and start all over? Or is it a different approach? And what are some of the decisions that can happen within the existing environment that just help the vibe and help the sound?
Sure. Well, vibe's all visual. I mean, most of it is. When we design studios, and people say, well, can I put artwork up? I would insist you put artwork up. We do a lot of colors that are not on the walls that lend themselves to supportive art. Listening to it really and truly, in my cases, in Easy Eye, which is Dan's studio, was just walk in there and talk in the room. And if you'll start to listen to your voice outside and what you sound like, and then you walk into a room and you talk, you can tell real quick what that room's going to do, even in low frequencies. Unless you have a very shrill voice. But even in low frequencies, you can walk into a room and listen to it and go, ooh, there's a lot of stuff hanging on here in your voice. So it comes from, you can go outside and your voice is what's in free field. And now all of a sudden there's no boundaries and no reflections. So learn what your voice sounds like outside. Then when you walk into a room, you can immediately, I mean, like, it's an acuity. It's an acuity. It's not it's not, you know, something that's God-given or whatever the case may be. But listen to your voice outside. Learn what your voice sounds like outside with no boundaries. And then start walking into rooms and be aware of what changes when you walk in that room. So in that case, it was very obvious that the room was too dead. And so we look for rooms. We start out with rooms too bright. You can always deaden them down. It's really hard to put out a piece of plywood and brighten them up. Right. But you can always throw down a rug and loosen them up. And so in that room, again, it was designed by someone who's fine at what he does. It just didn't fit Dan's musical taste, if you will.
Yeah, and we're talking about the control room. And
we're talking about the studio.
The studio space. Okay, great.
The tracking room part of it. The way that we look at things is we get the control room to be accurate so you can hear what the studio sounds like.
Yeah.
So if someone calls me and goes, look, I don't have a budget to do, a great big multi-million-dollar da-da-da-da-da, what would be your suggestion? The suggestion is get the control room to be accurate. Then have a studio. You can, once you know the control room is telling you what it's supposed to sound like and what that room sounds like, then if you have any sense at all, you can change things and move them around to get that to work. Unfortunately, the control room thing has been, the frequency response. Well, that's just one very small part of the picture. You need to know how much reverb you have on the tape or the recording or whatever you're doing, because if you've got reverb built into your room, then you really you're going to hear things that aren't actually there and artifacts and that. The other thing is depth. You need to be able to hear back into your speakers. If you sit and listen to our control rooms, you can hear a mile back into that speaker. And the depth comes from a lot of different things, linearity and amplifiers and that sort of thing. And consoles, quite frankly, there's some consoles that have no depth at all. And there's some that have massive amounts. If you listen to all the early records that were cut on Neve consoles, the one thing they all have in common is depth. You can hear all the way back there. There's a perception that it's not one-dimensional, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in a control room, in a studio, we're looking for depth. We're looking for things to expand and move away.
And then when you can hear accurately in the control room, now all of a sudden you can start making smart decisions about what to do with the microphones and whether you should put up a little treatment or take it down.
Reverb's a very tricky animal. And so there's all this about how you do that. Traditionally, what we do, let's say we go into a room we've never worked in before, we'll take a mirror and put it on the sidewall and sit in this mixed position and slide that mirror down. And when you can look in that mirror and see either one of those two loudspeakers, that's where something goes soft. The same thing happens on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Put a mirror on the ceiling, slide it down the ceiling. I'm sitting in a mixed position. I look in that mirror, see any loudspeaker, that's something soft. That immediately takes the first order reflection and the reverb out of the room.
Yeah, I remember that being a cool trick to learn. It's such a simple thing. I mean, although you do need a second person.
Yeah.
You need somebody to hold the mirror.
Well, yeah, that's true. And the other thing about that is that it's in around the first, there was a thing called LEDE room, which was a live end, dead end kind of thing.
Right.
That was hot in the 90s somewhere. You really don't want to make the room too dead, but you definitely, I love what you have. You have diffusion. Bookcases on the back wall are just spectacular for that.
I guess the joke too is it was probably a lot easier to find a mirror in the 1970s than maybe it is today in the control room.
It is for me. I still got razor blades though. I cut tape all the time.
So I was going to segue into asking you about, some of the basic things that we can do. So that's a great tip for basic treatment, simple treatment for the control room. What are some simple treatments for the recording space? If we're not used to what the sound of a great recording space is, how do we begin to educate ourselves? What are some materials that you can include in the recording space or remove from the recording space that might help out the sound of a drum set out there or whatever other instrument you want to do?
Well, that's an interesting question too. There's two ways you can handle sound. One, you can diffuse it or you can absorb it. I'm a fan of diffusion. And the way that sound works is if in the lower bass frequency, they travel in what's called a wave front. So if you drop a rock in a bucket of water, it goes out and hits the sides and comes right back to the center. As you go up higher in frequency, in every environment, there's a point where that's calculatable. The point.
Calculable or
calculable, whatever that word is.
Culpable.
Yeah, there you go.
Making up words.
Anyway, you can figure out where it will start to transition into a ray front, which is the same way as a flashlight or a light. So if you go into a room that has all mirrors and you put a fluorescent light bulb in it, that's going to give you an echo chamber. But in the low frequency energy, it's much harder to determine what's actually going to happen because in a 40 cycle wavelength is 28 feet long. So traditionally, the tracking room is larger than the control room is. Not all the time. We've got studios where they're both, but you've got a better opportunity to develop those frequencies in that room. So you need to look at a way to either diffuse those low frequency energies, like that bookcase is a great way to do it, or absorb it. Well, if you want to absorb, Tom Headley's approach was everything was anechoic. And so in order to do that, you had to put a quarter wavelength of a trap in the back of the room. So 28, what's a fourth of 30? I don't know, whatever that number is. You had to put, because the way that sound is absorbed is it goes through that bass trap, if you will, and then it tries to come back out. And that's really where you get the absorption. It's the same way with acoustical panels. If you put them right on the wall, like I see these things hanging in the ceiling that are just basically fiberglass wrapped with a fabric, and they're hanging down, I call them hanging chads. Right. They're just hanging down from the ceiling. They do nothing really. I mean, they a little bit. But if you turn that thing up and you put an airspace behind it, the more airspace you have behind that fiberglass panel, like 703, the lower the frequency starts to be absorbed, because the sound goes through that 703, strikes the ceiling above and tries to come back through. That's where you get absorption. So as you move it off that wall, you get more. So it's just really hard to tell. You really just got to listen to it and move it around. I mean, we have a bass trap that I stole from somebody really famous. I have no idea how it works. The damn thing works like a dream. I give the design to everybody I know, because you can build it with $25 worth of parts from Home Depot. I'll be glad to send it to anybody who wants it. The thing works like a dream. I have no idea how it works.
That's cool. That's
but
cool.
It will suck all the low end out of a weird room in a second. We build them in theaters now. We're doing a 2,000 seat theater, performance theater, and I put them in everything. They work like a dream, and they're just dumb as a brick. It's a piece of sheetrock with a hole in the middle, 2 feet square with a foot square hole in the middle, and the sheetrock actually moves. I mean, you don't
see it, but
it moves. But
wow. All right, well, maybe we can include. Maybe I can put that in the blog post.
I'll be happy
get that from you later.
I'll send you the detail. It's so stupid. It's like, now how could that possibly work? But it really does.
This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you are ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you are using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to mix in your own studio, and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. What are some of the things that you've seen as far as the evolution of studios from consoles to computer-based? And do you think that there are any rewards or drawbacks to designing your control room and listening environment with a much smaller desk and just like a computer screen versus, a traditional console? I mean, I've got a huge console in here.
Yeah, I love this desk. You should put that on everything you got. That's a serious. I mean, if that thing could talk,
Yeah.
how many records are made in that?
A lot.
Probably Margaritaville.
A lot of
that
stuff.
Was all done in Criteria. That era.
Margaritaville was done on that. Yeah. Grease soundtrack.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got to switch my brain back into Studio Tour mode. The Eagles, Hotel California.
I'm not surprised.
The Bee Gees records, Staying Alive, Saturday Night
That was
Fever.
always a great story. Man, the Bee Gees are terrible. Really? Well, they sold 33 million albums in 2 months. Can't be that bad. And they cut it on an MCI board. Oh, man, you have a Neve. No, actually, you can cut it on anything if you're cutting Shadow Dancing or whatever those songs are. Saturday Night Fever. Yeah, there's a great sounding board.
Well, I'm working on my own EP right now, and yesterday I needed to get ready to do vocals, and I thought, well, I mean, if I ever talk an artist into shooting out and picking the vocal mic that they want to use, I'm certainly obligated to do that myself. So I went through my vocal mics and I probably sang a verse and a chorus on 20 mics or something like that and picked one. And I did find one that I liked that I think I'm going to go with. However, I was also like struck by, man, is it hard? They all fucking sound like me singing, you know? It's like, does it make a huge difference? It's like, nobody's going to buy or not buy or like or dislike my record because of the vocal mic I chose.
I'm going to. And people get eaten up with that. I was with a friend who has a studio in New York, Jungle City, and she was saying that I can't use that word. The people that come there and work will literally hook up smart and put all the drum mics in phase with each other. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my whole life, you know? Sit there and time delay all the inputs until the drum mics all show up at the same spot. What are you talking about? You know?
I don't think that represents a real drum kit.
It represents morons. Is what I probably can't say that kind of idiots. Okay.
Let me ask you this question. What are some of the coolest studios you've seen? You must have seen a lot of studios and a lot of unusual approaches to doing things. Can you share any stories about just some cool ideas in studios design? Or maybe anything recently that's kind of gotten you interested?
You know, man, every day that Matt and I wake up and we start designing studios, we really look at it from the standpoint, this one's nothing like any other one. So right now we're doing a room for Kid Rock, and it's so cool, it's insane. I mean, it's just completely unique and completely different. And he's an unusual guy who has just and knows exactly what he wants. I mean, this is what I want, and I'm very proud of it. The same way with Garth Brooks, we're doing a couple of rooms for him, and we redid Jack's tracks, which is where he did all his hits, and it was really Jack Clement's original studio. And I'm not, as someone said one time, my friend Paul McCartney told me not to name drop. But I'm telling you this because all the studios we're doing are completely different and unique. I think that comes from maturity and knowing, again, back to that reference point, that I know what it's supposed to sound like, and I'm not really scared of it. And so that took a while, you know, because I was at the beginning, I was so cautious about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then after a while, it's like anything else, you learn what's really important and what's not, you know? And so we've been able to I'm the last outpost of common sense left in my industry. I really believe that. And even when we do really complicated things, the trick is to make them simple so that somebody can actually use it. The example I use is a remote control for your television. You know, it's just a friggin' nightmare. And you got 9 remote controls.
Yeah, good point.
You're trying to make them work, you know. And so everything that we do is based on simplicity and based on making music, not technology. I personally think that that Pro Tools is a great invention, but I think it's made engineers and players lazy as hell. I'll just fly that in. We had a really fun artist, and we were recording on tape, and she's real famous, and I don't think she'd worked on tape in a long time, obviously. And she said, you know, there's a motorcycle sound in the headphones. What? She said, yeah, there's like a motorcycle sound in the headphones. Like, damn, I built my own headphone system. I learned from Chips Moman that the headphone system needed to sound exactly like the big monitors, because if headphone systems got bright, edgy sound on it, guitar players out there listening to it, he's taking a treble off his guitar amp, you're back in the control room, getting back on. We're making 2 different records. And so I thought, what the hell is she talking about? So I put the headphones on. I don't hear anything. She goes, no, you'll hear it. So I said, well, just play along, you'll hear it. So we're singing along, doing background vocals. I backed the tape up. It goes, I said, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, that damn motorcycle sound. What the hell is that? I'm like, that's the tape backing up. Oh, okay.
That's great. That's
yeah,
great.
That really happened. I mean, like, okay. But the other thing that really kills me about the Pro Tools, and Matt is the gentleman that works with me, I make him move that stupid screen because he runs Pro Tools. I don't know. If it's got an XLR on it, I understand it. If it's got a keypad and a Cat 5, I don't want any part of it. I mean, it's just because you have to sort of determine what you're good at and do that, you know. It's not what I'm good at. I don't, you know. So Matt runs Pro Tools, and I make him move out of my line of sight Because if you're in a restaurant and the TV's going, your eyes are doing this. I don't care who you're sitting there with.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
you're looking up to see what happens. And I did a bluegrass record with a really interesting bluegrass group. That's a long story I probably shouldn't tell, and I won't. But it was really fun. And it was a really interesting experience. I'd never done a bluegrass record before. And this guy said, look, the Lord has said to me that you're the person to do it. And I'm thinking, boy, you need to talk to somebody else. You know, you've sort of messed this up. So I put up one microphone and we recorded it. And it was one Omni 87 and everybody just moved in and out of it. Man, it sounded so good. I cut it to a 2-track studio. It went, just straight. And so I sent it to a young man who was opening a mastering house. He was going to be a mastering engineer. And he calls me, he goes, man, there's noise all over this. I'm like, I don't think so. He said, oh, yeah, it's real noisy. I'm like, okay, let me play it. Let me take it. So I went and got it, put it on my machine. I don't hear any noise. I mean, it's got, the teeny bit of noise, but it's cut live to a 2-track, and the machine's tweaked by Studer Steve, and there's no noise. Oh, no, I'm sorry, man. I don't hear it. I just see it all over Pro Tools. You want me to take it off? No, I want you to bring me my damn tape back. That's what I want you to do. So it's just, I think it's really made the process, a wealth of features breeds a poverty of skills almost instantly. And that's so true in live sound, Everybody's got a gate, a compressor, and a parametric EQ and a third octave EQ. You start doing, if you go to famed studios and Muscle Shoals, some of the greatest records on the planet Earth were cut there. They have an EMT 140 and an LA 2A. That's it. That's all they got. And all those records were cut with nothing, And so now we got all these people are measuring time delays and microphones on drums.
I'm glad you brought up Fame Studios. That was another place that you got to work with. And
yeah.
I was hoping you'd tell the story about going down there and
from
what
God.
you did.
I wake up every day. I'm the luckiest human being on the face of the earth. And I bring so much enthusiasm to everything that I do because I'm just like this. I'm so grateful to be here. It's a gift, and I really thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being here.
No, I do. I mean, it's a gift to do what I do. I tell you, we bring kids over from Blackbird, and those kids are living a dream because they're getting to work with where they are at Blackbird, and Mark Rubel is just a great human being and a really wonderful instructor. And I tell them all the time, look, do whatever you got to do. Integrity is imperative. You got to be beyond reproach. But do whatever you can do to get in this business because it's the most fun, interesting. Don't you think so? Don't you wake up every day? Every day.
I don't have as many good quotes as you do,
well, that's okay.
But one
I'm
that,
a hell of a lot older than you are.
one that I felt pretty early on was that I just refused to take no for an answer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like a terrible thing if you're dating, but it's a great thing if you're trying to make it in the music business.
No, is it Bronson, the guy that owns Virgin Records? There's a quote from him. People ask me to do something. I tell them, hell yeah. I don't have any idea how to do it. I go figure out how to do it. And that's the mentality I grew up in, Like, I don't know what that is. I got a young man working with me now, Will, and Will, he'll just tell you, yeah, I know how to do it. I know it damn good and well he doesn't know how to do it. But I know he knows how to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Will Curry is just an unusual human being. I've got a great group of people working with me.
Well, so a couple of things about that. I mean,
Sure.
Definitely, I feel like in the music business, there's sort of external no's that come at you all the time and internal no's that come all the time. And that's sort of what I meant by that is just, not accepting those no's, just pushing through and then taking those risks and trying things that you've never tried before. There was years ago, I came to you as a young startup engineer who had already been in architecture school, and you were designing studios, and I came to show you my drawings, my architectural drawings, because I was curious about drafting and stuff. And at the same time, you also, one of the things you recommended as I was leaving, which struck me, was you said, man, I've been listening to these great tapes from Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
And you told me, you're like, you should check that out. And I was like, what?
Stupid fool.
But maybe we talk about that for just a sec. Now, at the time I didn't know what to make of it. Now, later on, I see a great amount of value in having mentors and finding, life coaching in some form or fashion or another, something to really open your eyes and your heart to the possibilities. And I feel like that ties into this idea of being grateful all the time, not really taking no as the answer to what you're capable of, and just saying yes. So I wonder if you want to, what do you want to say about all that stuff?
I'll try to talk about it. I get Tony Robbins changed my life, and I know that sounds so trite and trivial, but not because I became a disciple and walked on coals, but because he taught me several things that were really important. Number one is that you live in the moment. You be right here, right now, and be grateful for that. The other one was you take full responsibility for everything that happens in your life. That's the biggest one, because you're no longer a puppet. If somebody runs you off the road, damn, I wasn't paying attention. Right. And once you look at things from that perspective, all of a sudden you realize that, you know what, I can do anything. There's no boundaries from that end. And my mother gave me those tapes in the 80s and cassettes, and I threw them in the back of my car. Yeah, as soon as I get through the joint, I'll listen to Tony Robbins. Who the hell is that, The interesting part of that story was, and I won't bore you with all the details, I met him. He came to Nashville to speak, and it was, he's huge. He's like 6'5", and his hands look like bananas. His fingers look like bananas. Long story short, there were 4,500 people there. I had no idea. I was just going to enjoy it. And when I took a break for lunch, instead of going back, he went and sat down on the steps. And he started just talking to people. So I went and got in line, and I walked up to him. I was going through a really ugly divorce, and I finally got to him, and I said, man, thank you so much. Your tapes changed my life. And he's jumped up, and I'm like, oh, shit. This guy's like, a football player. And he grabbed me and hugged me, and he goes, that's what I wake up for every day. Sit down and tell me what changed your life. It was like, God, this guy's real. So it was a really interesting experience for me. But those are the kind of things that you take away from. Don and Carolyn Davis were, and Gene Petronas, the same thing from audio. They really brought these people together for you to learn from. Not every one of them, I always joke that they couldn't hear. They didn't have very good ears, but that didn't matter. They had brilliant ideas and brilliant thoughts. When I was working with Jose Feliciano in the 60s, there was he kept telling me about this guy that lived in the basement that had an audio situation in his house in California, and he worked for a jet propulsion lab. And he was an audio nut. I'm thinking, okay, great. Well, you're right. It was Dick Heiser. And I don't know if you know anything about Dick Heiser. If you don't, you should read his writings. The guy was profoundly brilliant. His job at Jet Propulsion Laboratories was to calculate the angle that the spaceships came into the atmosphere. So if they were coming too fast or too steep, they'd burn up. If they were coming too slow and they're at the wrong angle, they'd bounce off. Yeah. That was his job, his day job. And then he'd go home and work on audio. Well, he came up with time delay spectrometry, which is the basis of the smart thing. He came up with all these different things that he just did with surplus equipment he had that he got from JPL. So it's just a matter of finding someone that you trust and developing a reference point that you believe in. And the Tony Robbins stuff allowed me to do that. It just opened up a window. Whoever thought of taking responsibility for everything that happens in your life? What a profound statement and how hard that was.
Empowering.
Oh, yeah, and how hard it was to go, well, that's bullshit. I'm a victim. No, you're not a victim. You're a victim if you decide to be one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that on a certain level, we can extend that to and start taking responsibility for things outside of our immediate circle, and then a little further and a little further. Sure. And then you learn to accept certain things that you can't, there's nothing you can do about,
No, you can't.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's really empowering. I think it's really encouraging. And, like you say, it can sound a little bit, hippy dippy to bring it up on the surface. But when you dig in, you start thinking, holy shit, man, if I take responsibility for everything that happens with me and my music and my studio and my passion and love for this stuff and the difficulties and challenges that come with making a living in this, all of a sudden it's like, it's really empowering. And it is a good feeling. I was talking about this with my daughter the other day, about how, I don't know why it is, but I wake up and I take her to school on Monday mornings, and I love Monday mornings.
Yeah.
Something I get excited about it.
He talks about that.
It's crazy.
If you live for the weekend, You mean to tell me you'll live your whole life for 2 days a week? Doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't work for me.
I enjoy the weekends too, but
I do too. But
sometimes I can't wait to get back to work.
Yeah, me too. But I mean, that's the whole point, And the other thing he talked about was that expect things to happen. I think it was Ross, whatever his name was, that ran for president, said, well, you don't have to get in the ring, but you won't get your nose bloody, but you're sure not going to accomplish anything, I tell you, the greatest quote in the whole world is Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. Is that priceless? Somebody asked him one time, how you win all these fights? Well, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face.
That's great. Yeah.
That's another one. It's like, oh, shit,
All right, so let's segue into sports here for a minute.
Sure.
One of the projects that you worked on, which is just remarkable, is you installed the sound system, I believe it was, or you'll have to explain it, for the Indy 500 track, and more than just once, I think. So tell us the story behind that. What's that all about?
It was a childhood dream. I loved race cars growing up. My mother thought I was going to have greasy fingers all my life. So I went to a concert and somebody gave me a joint. I was like, oh, man, this is what I want to do. No more greasy fingers, which I was grateful for. They put a sound system in the Indy 500 that the racetrack is 2.5 miles long. A funny story was that when they were looking for sound systems, they called one of the most arrogant, obnoxious sound companies in the world. I will not mention their name, but they're in California and San Francisco. And they sent some rep out there, and he said, oh, yeah, we'll just take one speaker and put it at the end of the straightaway, and we'll cover the whole place. And it's 2.5 miles around the racetrack. The front stretch is 1 mile long. And he walked out there and he looked and he goes, I don't think that's going to work. No joke, fool. So they put a whole QSC sound system in the whole place. The gentleman that was the announcer, a gentleman named Tom Carnegie, who's passed away. His voice was on the radio and it was profound. I mean, the man was a genius because there was no video at that point. And so he would talk. They're on the back stretch and da-da-da-da-da, and they're coming around, all eyes on turn 4. And so they put this sound system in based on the fact they wanted to do concerts there. And so this is what Tom Carnegie sounded like, and people went crazy. No, we need to hear Tom Carnegie. Because they all, before were these great big, huge owl weather horns. So it was like this, and you heard every word he said perfectly.
Right.
And now it's like this. So after they put this sound system in, the long, funny story, but I won't go into that, they called me because someone had known my friend Dave Ducey had known that that's what I do, and he said, do you think I can fix it? And they were getting 30, the place holds about 300,000 people. I'm not supposed to say how many.
Wow.
In seats. And so they got a call, and Ducey said, do you think you can fix this? And I said, yeah, nothing I can't fix. Thank you, Tony Robbins. Nothing I can't do. And so I went up and looked at it, and sure enough, the problem was like every other problem. If you take a set of loudspeakers, they're designed in free field, which means that they're out with no boundaries. The minute you put them into an environment, that environment becomes a part of that situation.
Yeah.
And so you think, well, no, it's outdoors. No, it's not. The Speedway is very narrow, and there's walls, if you will, of buildings on both sides. It's the stands on one side, the pagoda on the other. On the front stretch, it's out basically in a room. And so I figured out what they did, and I fixed it. And so they went from 30, 40,000 complaints a race to 0 in the thing. And so at that point, they had a a CD player that they brought back when the Indy cars went to Japan. And that was all they had for music. And so the marketing people go, well, look, now we got it working. Can we do this? And so it developed into just a nut house. The last year we just did it. We put the guy playing taps up on the flag stand. Whew, it sounded unbelievable. Going through that tunnel of buildings and 300,000 people, just unbelievable. I mean, if you go to, that's a YouTube thing you want to go look and listen to my work.
Yeah.
Just Google the pre-race at Indy 500.
Okay, cool.
And you'll see what I'm talking about. It's really gorgeous. They have a new announcer. Tom Carnegie passed away. A guy named Dave Calabro, who's really, really good. It was a family. I loved it. I had the best time of anything in the whole world. I've been there for 10 years, and this year I decided It's exhausting. I mean, we did the audio. We provided audio for everything: the streaming, the television, the radio, the media, the print media, plus the PA. It just went on and on and on and on. So it was a really wonderful challenge. It wore me the fuck out, and I'm glad that I didn't realize how much it stressed me out until this year. I'm like, hey man, I feel pretty good. I don't have to go.
Yeah. Well, so that was another thing I wanted to ask you about because, the enthusiasm for being in the studio, the drive to say yes I can and be able to do all these things. Like I say, when I met you 25 years ago, that's when you were sort of saying, hey, check out this guy Tony Robbins, and I think you were. I felt like the way you told the story, it felt like you were launching the business that you've been doing for the past 25 years. I know you've been doing plenty before that,
yes.
but you've done many remarkable things since then.
Thank you.
What are some lessons that you learned about life-work balance, and what do you want to share with the rock stars about that?
Oh well, I'm big on that. I play a lot of tennis. I fish a lot. And I party a lot. I'm 71 and I still party all night and run my friends in the ground. You have to have a balance. You have to have something that takes you away from it in order to recharge your batteries. I don't really, I tell people all the time, look, we're just making records here. We're just building a studio. It's not an ER. Nobody's going to die. And so you have to be very serious and very dedicated, but you also have to be able to let it go. Most of the time when I come up with some idea, it's when I'm not in the middle of the pressure of being there. Indianapolis was the most pressure filled thing I'd ever. I mean, we used to joke that well, we fucked up bigger than this, because that was the biggest. I mean, it's the single largest state sporting event in the world. So you have to be able to take yourself out of that, But I learned a long time ago that the only time you can do that is when you got your shit together. You have to be able to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And you can't, it's okay to say, yeah, I can do that, but you also have to understand there are some limitations. But fortunately, Einstein said one time, you don't have to know everything, you just have to know, go look it up. And now with the internet, Will, that works with me, if I start asking him a bunch of complicated questions, the next thing I know, a little bastard's on his phone Googling it, And that's so brilliant, rather than, just stumbling around trying to figure it out. Men wouldn't read instructions as sort of like it's like, oh man, I feel like a failure because I read the damn instructions. But it's really easy in Google because you can look through the part of the instructions that you want and not have to read the whole damn thing about, don't get in the bathtub with a blow dryer. I'm like, hello. And there's about 2 pages of that, So now I need to know, how do I get it to speak Spanish? That's all I got to know.
Don't get in the bath with the blow.
Listen, have you seen some of the stuff in there? It's like, do not operate while standing in water. Really? You ever watch the Darwin Awards? Are you
No, I haven't seen that.
Twitter? Oh my God, unbelievable, Eric.
That's great, man.
Hold my beer.
Well, it's one of the things that I really have discovered with interns here at the studio is I've learned that it's like, being able to Google very quickly on your phone is a studio skill now. It literally is. It's like, I'll stand there, we'll be working on something. Yeah. And I run into I wonder, what's the deal with this? Yeah. And if an intern's really sharp, they're already Googling what we are working on and trying to solve in that moment.
Keep that guy around as long as you can, because not all of them do that. Yeah. Yeah. In one of Rubel's classes, there was some kid that fell asleep while I was talking. I kicked him in the foot. I said, "Yo, man, got a lot of money?" What? I said, "Your father have a lot of money." I said, "You're gonna be living in his basement playing video games." Excuse me, here pretty quick.
That's funny, man. Yeah, we used to have a teacher when I was in 8th grade. It was a Latin class. It was a class on Latin and also like Greek history, I think it was.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
And he was actually the author of the book Sounder. You remember that book?
Really? Yeah, for sure.
And he used to go around and if you put your legs out like you were relaxing, he'd come over. And the threat was that he would jump up in the air to jump down on your knees to wake you up. So he never did it though. Yeah, but he was also supposedly could do 1-arm pull-ups. I didn't see that either.
Show me that one.
All right. Well, let's. We've been going for a good long stretch, so let's ask some closing questions here.
Sure.
When you started out doing all this stuff, started out recording, started out designing studios, what was holding you back?
Not a damn thing.
Nothing.
My parents were encouraging. I didn't have good enough sense to say no. And I had a lot of wonderful friends that were very generous in their knowledge, in their we owned a bunch of nightclubs together, which we got in a lot of trouble with, and nothing, really nothing at all. Because I really believed that that's what I wanted to do, you know. And I think kids put too much pressure on themselves now to decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
I didn't have a wallet till I was 30. I mean, we were making a lot of money, but I had a big wads of money in my pocket falling out everywhere. But I didn't. I think kids put too much pressure on themselves. You know, 18, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I'll tell it anyway. So Will comes to me and he goes, man, people I work for want to know, it's a rock show, huh? Okay. So these people want to know, he's 20, and they want to know, what are your goals for life? And all these serious questions. I said, you go back in there and tell them, you're 20 years old. My goal to life is sleep with as many women as I possibly can. And he said, really? I said, yeah, you go tell him that. So he went back and told him. And nobody was really impressed, but at 20, that's pretty much what it was about.
Fairly accurate. That's fairly accurate.
I mean, I'm sorry, tell him that, you know. So I didn't have anything holding me back. My parents were incredibly encouraging. My mother was a very unique individual. And, you know, as an example, the Boy Scouts called and said, you know, your son doesn't do anything like anybody else. And, you know, he's not conforming. And my mother said, great, I'll come get him. I don't want him to conform, you know, that kind of stuff. When drugs came around, we lived in Louisiana, drugs came out everywhere. And my mother said, you know, why don't you just come home and smoke dope? And I'm like, how'd you even know about dope? She goes, well, it's everywhere. You know, she said, if you just come, because I was driving, you know, high-powered race cars all the time. Why don't you just come home? Okay, is that cool? Yeah, come on, bring your friends over and smoke dope here. This is like 1960, you know, 62, 65, somewhere in there. No, it must have been 68. And so my friends would go, man, let's go smoke some dope somewhere. I'm like, yeah, come on to my house. What? Yeah, come on, parents don't care. It took all of the adrenaline out of it. The whole, I'm sneaking out, I'm getting away with something. I didn't give a shit. You know, I was like, hey, whatever, you know. It just diffused everything. So when I got to that point in my life where I knew what I wanted to do, I didn't have any fears, you know.
Right.
And the other thing is, too, growing up with parents like that, and I don't know anything about your life, my mother was pissed at 92 that I was the only child that she knew of any of her friends that hadn't moved back home. And so I had a safety net that I knew at any point in my life, if I had to, my parents would take care of me. And so that gives you a great sense of, and if you got parents, and I'm talking to you millennials, if you got parents and they love you and they support you, and you're not taking advantage of that situation by stretching out and doing something you're uncomfortable with, you're an idiot. Because I'm telling you, I don't want you to move home to your basement, but you need to understand that's a gift. Not a lot of people have parents who are that supportive.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to recognize, you know, at a younger age too, to take advantage of your parents in a positive way.
I don't need any, I never took any money from my parents. I really didn't. And I didn't take advantage of it other than the fact that I realized that I knew if I had to, I could go home. You know, my kids know that. My kids would I have a son and a daughter, and I told them, listen, I don't care what happens. If you get in a car with somebody you're uncomfortable, you get in trouble, I'll come get you, no questions asked.
Yeah.
My parents told me that too.
Yeah, my mom used to tell me that too.
Like, I'll come get you, no questions asked. So about 3:30 in the morning, my son calls, hey, Dad, you know, remember when you told me to come get me? Yeah, he goes, I need you to come get me. I said, okay, no problem, I'll come get you. Where are you? I'm out on Hillsborough Road. How I'll find you? Oh, there's so many police cars, you won't miss me.
Oh, no.
That's my boy.
That's great, man. What a great story. Yeah. All right, let's see. Let's jump to, you've already shared some of the best advice. If you got anything more to share, feel free to, but you shared so many amazing quotes already.
Well, you know, honestly, I don't, because it comes to me, Jerry Lopez, the guy in Santa Fe, said, you know, man, I do really good, and then I go to sleep at night, and I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, the committee's going, well, you should have done this, and you should have done that. And I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And that happens to everybody. They have this whole part of the little guy standing on their shoulder, hey, motherfucker, it's a vibe. We all have that. We all have doubts and uncomfortableness and that sort of thing. You just got Anthony Robbins. You got to expect that, you know, that if you're doing something, something's going to happen. it's going to be uncomfortable. You got to work around it.
I think an extension of that too is remembering that other person that we looked up to, that we think, man, that person really kicks ass at what they do. I wish I was as good as that.
Sure.
They also are dealing with that same self-doubt, self-fear, and just looking to somebody, beyond them probably. And if they're not, then maybe they're psycho.
No, that's true. There are people like that. One of my friends has more money than Jesus, literally. And we were playing tennis one time, and he goes, man, this anxiety is killing me. And I'm like, John, what does that even mean? I didn't know what anxiety was. I had no idea what he was even talking about, And we were billions, Like, how could you be anxious with that kind of money, Somebody's always got more money. Somebody's always got a bigger penis. There's always somebody that's got something you got, and they still got their shit, trust me.
Yeah. Yep. Well, all right. So how about sharing a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use on the next recording session?
Players.
All right.
Yeah, that's it. That's the key to it, If you listen to an unbelievable guitar sound, you listen to James Taylor records, it's Don Grolick, it's Steve Gadd, it's the Becker brothers, those records are made by players.
Yeah.
And if you're not, Rick Hall used to say all the time, if you don't hear an A side, you don't have an A side. If the B side's great now, you don't have an A side. It's all made up of players, and it's amazing. We've got a young man that's working in the studio named Jax, and he brought he's 15 or something. He must be 16. He's got a car now, but he brought this kid over here to play piano. The kid was unbelievable. It's just about players.
Yeah.
James House said to me one time, he's a really unbelievable artist. He said that his real good friend was Mick Fleetwood, and they had a band in L.A., and he was the front man. He sang and played guitar, which he does beautifully. His gorgeous voice, gorgeous player. And he said that they'd be playing along, and Mick would go from some other gig to somewhere else, and he would come in and sit down between songs and drums, and James didn't notice he was back there. Same drums, same sticks, same everything. And all of a sudden, the whole band had a completely different feel. And it's just about players.
If you're lucky enough to already know the right players, or maybe you've got an open line to be able to invite them in on your sessions, that's wonderful. What if you're hearing this advice and you're thinking, yeah, but I don't know the right players to call? Did you ever go through an experience of trying to find players that you didn't know? You got any advice about that?
I do all the time. I go to nightclubs, and if I hear somebody, like Here Come the Mummies, I won't tell you who they are, but there's a pair of brothers in that band. They're unbelievable. They played at my, they're in clubs. You go, you'll hear it. You'll hear the guitar player like, oh shit, that's unusual. That's unique, and it feels just right. Drummers are the hardest ones to find. The drummers all want to play lead. Make it simple, stupid.
That's how I found my bass player for my EP. In
a band?
Emma Lambiazzi.
Yeah.
I just saw a show, and it was a big band on stage.
Sure.
And they're all laying it down.
Sure.
And it hit me, and I was like,
one
you'll
get it.
player is holding this whole thing together beautifully.
They do. Walter Sear used to say that he was in the Philadelphia Philharmonic. He used to say in 17 seconds, when a new player came along, within 17 seconds they knew whether he was going to be there after this audition or not. And that's how profound it is when you hear someone that can play at that level, It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Very cool. Walter Sears, we didn't get to talk much about that. I think you worked at Sears Sound as well. You said you designed his studio.
I loved Walter. We'd go dumpster diving. We had more fun than any two people. I cried for weeks when he died. It was really, really heartfelt for me because Walter was one of the single most unique human beings on the face of the earth. Someone said one time that when an old man dies, a library burns down, and that's absolutely Walter Sear. He was a library. You should read all of his articles. Have you read them? He wrote, What Have They Done to My Art? Have you heard that?
No,
not
yet.
It's on his website. Or Brain Surgery at Home. He said, I don't know why I can't do, when Pro Tools first came out, he goes, I don't understand why I can't breathe brain tools. I got a bright light and a knife. Why can't I do brain surgery on my table at home?
What would Tony Robbins say to that one?
I don't know. Well,
maybe. All right, cool. How about sharing with us either a favorite hardware tool, maybe something physical that you were just always glad you had it on sessions? or for studio designs, or just something you're thinking about recently? So it's kind of a broad question, but
it is. But Walter gave me a piece of equipment that I would love for you to come over sometime and listen to. It's passive. It weighs about 30 pounds. It's just got an in and out jack. That's all it's got. No power cord. And back when film was before talkies, and then they started having talkies in film, that the sprocket in the projector would go, and so I don't know who made it, but it's on the cover. I can't remember the name of it. Some really famous. I may think of it in a minute. Anyway, they had a device that you could plug into the audio system and dial this big black knob that's great big baked knob. It's the only big one knob. And you could dial that in to where it would take out the noise of the
sprocket wheels.
Yeah,
wow.
Going around. There's 3 in the world. West Trek, that's a minute. 3 of them in the world. Walter has 2 at his studio. He gave me one. And a big long letter explaining how it works. I'm telling you, man, and I'll bring you something that I've recorded with it. You can take someone's vocal and put it through that box and literally ease it up, and their vocal will come right out on the end of your nose.
Wow.
It's the most unbelievable thing I have no idea how it works. I've never stuck a scope on it. I've never stuck a generator through it. But Matt and I will just marvel because there'll be somebody singing, and we'll just pull it right out on the end of your nose. It's the craziest thing in the world. No power cord, 2 things going in. It's got some big oil capacity. I don't know what it is. But here,
wow,
it's
interesting.
Amazing. So that's my secret sauce. Unfortunately, they're not anymore, but it's an interesting box. You should come here. It's really amazing. But,
let me ask you the same question for software tools. Anything that you love to be able to use software-wise on a record, or anything you're excited about recently?
No.
No.
I don't work in a box.
All right, cool.
Matt does. Matt goes along fine with the box.
Matt is your software tool.
Matt's my software tool. Hey, Matt, what does this do? Walter had a sign in the studio that said, Apple save your career. And it's save. And that's pretty much how it worked. I really don't. One of my friends is Alan Shulman. He's a brilliant engineer, brilliant mastering engineer, did a lot of records at Muscle Shoals. And he is a little more into that. And he when we were doing this last record with Lady Nash, he actually showed me a couple of things that were really, really, really cool. I don't know how to use them, Matt does, but I don't know, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll be home and glad. Ask Matt what it is and then send it back to you.
All right, cool. Well, let's go to something that you definitely have experience with. What advice would you like to share or resource for the business side of doing this? If you want to make records, if you want to build a career out of this, what advice do you have for people about doing, handling the business aspect of what you do properly?
You're talking to the wrong person.
All right, fair enough.
I give shit away. I go meet somebody and they're really cool. Like, oh yeah, okay, all right. I'm not good at that at all. I've never cared about. I don't want to say that it's naive and stupid to say you don't care about money, but I've never really been money driven. I think that's part of it.
Music driven.
Oh yeah, I'll go meet somebody and they're really wonderful and they're pleasant and they're enthusiastic and I will help them with anything at all. I'm really not. In fact, I did a project for a computer company. I didn't even get a contract, and my part of it was not $16 million, but the whole project was $16 million, and my part of it was way up in 6 figures. Did it on a handshake, and there was no problem with it whatsoever. My lawyer was just doing backflips. I'm the wrong person to ask that question. Yeah. I don't really. My girlfriend is a CPA. The most brilliant mind I've ever met in my entire life, which is so fucking annoying. But she has made me successful financially because she's so smart.
That's great.
And she won't let me give anything away.
Well, I think that's good advice too, reminding us to work with people and find people that are just like the players. You find people that are really great at what they do and work with them.
And that's an Anthony Robbins. Surround yourself with people that don't do what you do. Allison worked at a really famous accounting firm one time. And she had 30 or 40 people that worked under her. And people would come in, well, you don't know how to do that. She goes, well, no, if I didn't do that, then we need you. And I thought, well, that's a really good point, If I knew how to do that, if I knew how to run Pro Tools, I wouldn't need Matt. Not really, but it's in the same sense. So surround yourself with people that do what you don't do really well.
Yeah.
And then I've got a great team. There's myself and Allison and Matt and Will and Tom Moores, and I think we could whip the world. I mean, the stuff that we do is really, really good. And I don't mean that arrogantly, because I'm more impressed with it every day, that we're able to accomplish what we can in this world full of, technology is such spectacular. But it's important to remember that talent comes from people. It doesn't have anything to do with technology. Yeah. It has to do with how you feel about what you're doing. When Ray Stevens called me and he said, I'm going to build this theater, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I said, well, the band that you're going to use, is that the same band you're using on TV? He said, yeah, aren't they great? I said, yeah. And I've got nothing to worry about because they are unbelievably good. I can't fuck this up. You know?
Yeah. Well, there's that quote from Bruce Wadeen where he said, nobody ever left a music store humming the sound of the console.
No, that's exactly right. Isn't that great? It's so true.
It's the people. All right. So closing question, we're going to take this hypothetical, but we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You're going to go back, find young Steve, maybe as he's entering the fairgrounds at Opryland or something like that, or even long before that when you're working on race cars, and you're going to give yourself one bit of advice. You say, listen, dude, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
I think the advice that I would give anybody is to show up with enthusiasm, a smile on your face, and a positive attitude. And I've done that all my life. I don't care where I'm going, what I'm doing, I want to be, I think, again, it's so easy to be successful now. Just show up with some enthusiasm. Show up with integrity. Integrity's for me, don't get me wrong. I say shit I shouldn't say, but integrity is so important,
Yeah.
To have someone that most of the time, I've never advertised. I've never, ever done any. In fact, I didn't want a website. Allison made me get a website. And we turned down 5 jobs a week. And it's because when I tell somebody I'm going to be there at 5 o'clock, I'm there at 5 o'clock, 5 after. But I mean, it's the music business, But at the same time, if I tell somebody this is what we're going to do, we do it. And that's the greatest advice you can give anybody. Show up with enthusiasm. Don't fucking half-ass do anything,
Yeah.
Do it the best of your ability. It may not be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Nothing is, but do the best you can possibly do and have a smile on your face. And, okay, Tony Robbins tells a story about a guy named Tom Watson who was at IBM, and he fucked up something. And the president of IBM called him in, and he said, you just cost us $14 million or $20 million or whatever it is, and it's a disaster, and we don't know what we're going to do. And Tom said, well, I guess you want to quit. He goes, hell no, I don't want you to quit. You just learn what not to do, And it's just the way that you have to look at life. Things going to happen. Shit's going to happen. You're going to get obstacles all the time because you're doing something. If you're not doing anything, you're right. You can sit in your mom's basement and play video games and do half-ass records. I've never done a demo in my life. If I'm going to sit down at that desk and spend my time, which is the most valuable thing you can give somebody, is your time, then I'm going to do that as a record. If it doesn't go anywhere, that's fine. But I did a lot of sound-alikes, and I loved every minute of it. It's like, oh man, listen to this, sounds exactly like Heart, But
that's great.
We still had the same enthusiasm, stupid enthusiasm, and that translates. People pick that shit up quick, When I go into a business meeting with them, we turn out hundreds of sets of drawings, and some of this stuff is so cool. We're doing all the new Austin City Limits television studios, KLRU in Austin right now. This is so complicated, it's insane. But if you go into a meeting with people, and you'll find out that everybody in that meeting is trying to find somebody to do this with, point the finger at.
Right.
If you just look up and go, hey, I do this all the time. You know what? You're right. It is a problem. I'm afraid we made a mistake. We'll figure it out. Tell me what we need to do. It takes all the fucking negative energy out of the room. And the next thing you know, don't worry about it, man. We got in a budget. We'll move it over here. Don't worry about it at all. I've never had anybody that came back to me and goes, well, blah, 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 And Robin said one time, I thought it was so profound, if somebody comes and gets in your face, you go, you know what? You're right. I'm so sorry. I really made a mistake. I apologize sincerely. man, people just drop whatever anxiety they have on me, because it's like, what, because usually I'm like, because my ego goes, well, motherfucker, I learned to fight in bars, don't be picking on me. It's just a different way of looking at life. And if you go out there with that enthusiasm and that excitement, the other thing is don't watch the news. Get out there and show up with enthusiasm. You can't lose. You cannot lose. You go to work at Burger King, the only fucker in there who cares about Burger King, you'll end up owning the Burger King and owning 4 more. And the next thing you know, you'll be wherever you want to be. It's just real easy to do.
That's good advice, man. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us.
I appreciate it.
What a pleasure hanging out with you. I don't see you often enough, but I'm glad we get to hang out for a couple hours just now. Let the rock stars know how they can find you. Where do you want to send them? You do have a website now.
I do.
Steven Durr Designs.com. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'll have the link in the show notes here.
My email address is steve@steven, STEVENDURR.com, steve@stevendurr.com. That comes directly to me. I'm not one of those idiots that sits in front of the screen and waits for somebody to write me. So if you write me, it may take me a while to get back. But I love to share what I do. I'm happy to share any. I have no secrets. My ex-wife used to say, why are you telling them that? Why are you telling them that's all your secrets? No. Michael Jordan made basketball look so easy. It was a joke. And I make things look too easy. But if you need some information or something, I'm happy to share with you.
Groovy. Well, thanks so much, dude.
Thank you, buddy.
Absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Look forward to seeing you around the studio, and I can't wait to come see some more of your designs. Here and
you got to come see our place.
All right, we'll do it.
It's a religious.
What's the name of your studio here?
The Showroom. I used to call it because if you can't sing, we can't record. but I put that on a business card, and my insurance guy goes, man, I just don't think you ought to call it I was like, okay. A tree fell through it and crushed it, and so we had to start over. So it's an interesting experience.
All right, cool, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. Also, remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with these weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com. Look for the link in the show notes. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio, all totally free. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.